So we're in our final part of the teaching portion of our series of Be Rich. Be Rich is just an annual generosity campaign where we take a few weeks together to go as a community, how do we make sure that we be rich to the people who are around us? And it's all based on this verse that Paul writes in 2 Timothy 6, which says, "Command those who are rich in this present world to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." So we just take a bit of time every year just to say, how is it that we as 21st century Australians who are located here in the city of Kalamunda, how is it that we ensure that we are being generous with everything that we have? And there's three ways that we look at how to be generous. We look at the idea of give, serve, and love. Giving is all about how do we make sure that part of our finances go away from us. One of the big temptations in life is that everything we have is for our consumption, and we find ourselves very quickly going, if it's mine, I earned it, and it's just for me. But freedom can be found when we're actually generous with what we have, and when we get to give part of our finances away. We talk about this a lot, is this idea that you can say to your finances, you don't control me. In fact, you don't control me so much that I'm able to take part of you and I'm able to give you away. Some of you practice giving by giving to the church. Some of you give to local places in our community. Some of you give in international spaces as well. There's all sorts of ways that people practice giving to make sure that we put that part of our lives and say, finances aren't the be all and end all, how do I give some of it away? Then serving. Serving is all about how do we make sure that all of my time isn't just for me? Because it's really fun, right? Like, has everyone been on holidays? Right, you've all been on holidays. And the first bit of the holidays is so much fun. Like, you can just do nothing. And you just go, and then towards the end of the holiday, especially when you get a really long set of holidays, you start to go, what's my purpose? Someone I know just went on, they had about 4 months off, right? Imagine that, 4 months off their work. And they're back, they're ready to go. And I was having a chat to him and I asked him, so what was your lesson? What did you learn in your 4 months off? And he said, at the beginning, I went, and I breathed deeply for the first time in many years. But by about the second month, I started to feel the loneliness of not contributing. And he actually had to undo some of those thinking in his head that was, I have to contribute. If I don't contribute, I don't have worth. And he got to the end and he said it was a really spiritually forming time because he had to learn to go, how am I okay with just being me, even if I don't contribute to the world in my work space? And then he said, you can't be all about you, is what he came away saying. You can't be all about you. How do you give part of yourself away? How do you be okay with who you are? So serving is just an opportunity to go, my time is not all just for me. It's actually something we get to use to love other people as well by serving them. And then finally, we talk about the idea of love. And loving is all about loving your neighbor and showing that you appreciate them. Not just your neighbor in church, but your neighbor who lives next to you. And how can you show them that you love them? Now, bricks. Now, this is just a quick aside. I have had some of you come to me and talk to me about the bricks. And I can say to you safely, the bricks are all behind there. You can grab them as you please. I don't care enough about the bricks. Originally I said, come and tell me, Jared or Ruth, and we'll give you a brick. And some of you said you don't like that system. And I said, that's fine. I was just trying to keep the kids from grabbing them. The bricks are all there. Go nuts. You don't have to come and tell me. Someone did point out, in Ephesians 2, it's all about, your works aren't your salvation. Don't boast in your works. And I've actually found a theological gap here generationally because a couple of you that came up and said, I don't like this idea of the bricks because coming up to you and one person said, it sounds like I'm sort of boasting in what I'm doing. I realized there was a big theology back in the day around don't boast about the work that you do, right? It's for the God and God alone. Growing up, I've never heard that sermon. You know the sermon I've heard? Please volunteer, for the love of God, volunteer. Tell everyone you can that you volunteer. So there's been a transition that's happened where back in the day it was like, of course you're doing good works. Don't tell and boast about it. And my generation, I grew up with just like pleading people, please do good works. It sort of transitioned there a bit. So the bricks are available for everyone. The story behind the bricks is if you love your neighbor, take them some food, give them some company, make them a gift. You can go grab a brick and put it in to 3 of the little jars there. And it's just a community way of saying, look at all the stuff we've done together to love the people around us. So the bricks are there. It's a good way. They'll be out for the next couple of weeks as well. And you can just go and show love to your neighbor, and you can go and get a little brick and put it into that. And it's just a little bit of fun, not tied to salvation in any way, shape or form. So sorry. Hopefully we're all good. And I've talked to about 4 of you about this, so it's not one of you individually. It's like, and anyway, doesn't matter. Okay. I didn't want my Lego bricks to derail this whole thing, so they're there. Please take them. Go for it. Give, serve, love. It's something that the church, when we've been at our best, has made the church stand out from everyone else. So if you look at church history, you might think, the thing that's made the church stand out is going to be, their amazing Bible studies or their great theology, or perhaps their really big buildings. I mean, in Australia, we're not really privileged to have those really cool church buildings because we're really young. But if you go to Europe, and I haven't been, I just get to see pictures online, they're pretty cool, right? Some of the churches over there are just phenomenal. And I'm looking at a picture. Just hands up. Have anyone been to those big churches and cathedrals? Yeah. So just tell me, it's better in person, right? Yeah. I'm in awe through a picture, so I can't wait till I can get to one day. Just need my kids to each pay for themselves, and we'll get there. It ain't cheap to fly. Those things are good. Those things are great. Theology, Bible studies, buildings, having good coffee, all that stuff's all great. But the thing that makes the church stand out throughout history has constantly been the church's ability to love people well. Not just love the people inside the church, but to love the people in the community who many people have given up on or people don't want to love. The church has done phenomenally well when we have said, I'm going to give of my time, of my finances, of my resources to go and be with and be present to and be surrounded by and love those in our world who come across our paths, and to love them well. Not because we're great people, but because that's what Jesus did for us. He loved us even when we were unlovely. And those of us that follow him have an opportunity to love people even when it's hard to do sometimes. The church has stood out when we've loved the people inside, but more importantly, those who are outside the church walls. And it all comes down to this thing here of what Jesus had to say. And we have recorded for us in John's Gospel. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 4 writers give us the Gospels that tell us who Jesus is, what Jesus did, what Jesus said, in fact. And one of the things you've got to remember if you read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is that Jesus probably didn't just say it once and it was done. Like, it wasn't one of those things where Jesus went, I've told you it once, you're going to be able to do it. Jesus probably said these things again and again and again to different audiences and different places, so that later on when the people got to writing down, what was it Jesus said again? They were able to figure it out and go, that's right, he kept going on about this, this, and this. This is one of those things I think he would have said constantly. Jesus said this, recorded for us in John chapter 13. A new command that I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, by the way that you love one another. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The reason this stands out in Jesus' teaching is because at the time, people who were in Jesus' position, his job was a rabbi. He would go around and tell people about God, and he was a wise person. But in his position, what would normally happen is that a teacher or a rabbi, they would go and reinterpret the law of Moses, or they would put their spin on things. But it wasn't very often that they would give their own new version of it, or their new command. So it's almost like Jesus in this moment is saying, I have the authority to give you guys a command. So I'm going to give you this new one, to love one another. Now that part, to love one another, is not new. And intrinsically, it feels right? Like when you think about it, like not just as a Christian thing, just as a thing, as a person thing, as a people thing. Our world runs better when people love one another, right? When we are able to do that. But Jesus took that thing of love one another, which they would have heard, it's also in the Old Testament, in the origin story of the Jewish people and everything. Look, love one another, they get that. But Jesus twisted it a little bit further, and he said, you know what? If I say to you, love one another, you're going to end up in the same spot you did before. You're going to end up trying to make, loopholes and workarounds. You're going to say, love one another, and you're going to figure it out. Humans are smart. So Jesus went, I'm going to tie this to something. So that when I say to you, love one another, and you go, well, what does that look like? I'm going to give you something which makes it abundantly clear what it looks like to love one another. And he puts that statement in, as I have loved you. And in that moment, Jesus became the benchmark of what love looked like. So then we ask ourselves, all right then, if we love one another as Jesus has loved us, what does that look like practically? Well, we need to go through the story of Jesus and see what Jesus did and what Jesus said and how Jesus interacted with the people around him. And here's just a couple of the things that Jesus got up to. When Jesus was coming to the end of his life and he was trying to teach the people following him what it meant to be in charge and what it meant to have authority, the way that Jesus taught them this was they had their shoes off, he got down and he washed their feet. And it was this beautiful word picture of washing feet, the person who's at the top. It's always like, just to contextualize for our modern day and age, could you imagine in your workplace, you're sitting there at your desk and the CEO comes by your office. Now, for some of you, that might be a common thing. The CEO of the top of the organization coming to meet you might be like, oh, hi, Jeff, or whoever your person is. For some of you, that might be a terrifying idea. If they're here, there's a problem. Anyway, imagine the CEO of the company, wherever you work for, whoever's the top dog, coming alongside you and saying, hey, I love the fact that you're here in the company with me. And I want to actually serve you right now. This part breaks down a bit. Imagine if they washed your feet. You'd probably start to freak out a little bit. You're like, I showered this morning. Is there an HR complaint? What's going on here? But Jesus' point was, people in authority aren't in authority for themselves. People who are in authority are there to serve. So when it comes to loving one another, love looks like serving no matter where you are in the organization, no matter where you are in the family, no matter where you are in that friendship group. Loving one another is about serving one another. Another part of Jesus' life. Jesus was famous for going around and eating with people he shouldn't have eaten with. One of the stories we looked at the other day was Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and he wanted to see Jesus. He jumped up into a tree. Jesus is going by, and Zacchaeus is thinking to himself, I just want to see what this is about. And Jesus stops where he is, looks up at him and goes, hey, you, I'm going to come and eat at your house. Zacchaeus freaks out, goes home, prepares the place. Jesus comes by, they meet together, and he has a complete turnaround. But the people watching were like, oh, I'm not so sure he should be doing that, because reputation was huge. And the fact that Jesus was in the presence of the wrong person put his position in jeopardy. And Jesus said, I don't care. The reason I came here to this earth is to seek and save those that are disconnected from their heavenly Father. So what does it look like to love? If we love one another as Jesus loves us, what we see in Jesus' life is that he was not afraid to go out and to be associated with whoever. You see, the law and the rules said that if you're clean and you go and hang out with someone who's dirty, you become dirty. So avoid them. But Jesus came and flipped that on their head and said, if you're clean and someone's perceived as dirty and you go with them, their dirt doesn't jump onto you. Your cleanliness goes out onto them. And there's a complete change in thinking. And we get that, and we see that now. Those of you who are involved in the social sector and in working with people, positive community changes lives. It rewires your brain. It changes how people develop. When people are put into places where they're negative, that kick up old things like they don't have a hope. But when people come into places where they're supported, loved, seen, known, and they have the opportunity to grow, they change. The environment changes the person. And so Jesus was going in there and saying, I'm happy to hang out with these people. I'm happy to be there because my goodness is so good, it's going to spill out into the space. And it's going to overflow. So when Jesus says, love as I have loved you, he took his disciples with him and he said, your goodness is going to shine a light into this space here and it's going to overflow because of the power that I've given you. So Jesus talks about when you're in authority, you're there to serve. When it comes to who you hang around, don't worry about them getting their stuff onto you. You've got something more powerful. Jesus says, I'm big, I've overcome the world, which means when we go into spaces, he's already there and he's ready to work. Jesus fed people. He showed hospitality. He went and was fed by people, but when he had large groups of people, and they were meeting with him. He performed some miracles. He fed people. He came alongside other people. He spoke hard truths in different environments. Jesus asked a lot of questions. So Jesus was asked questions because he's the wise teacher. He performed the miracles. Jesus would rock up to a town and they would go, we've got him for a short amount of time, and they wanted to know the truth. And Jesus was asked a lot of questions. The amount of times that Jesus responded directly to a question, does anyone know how many times it was? Like actually answered their question properly? In all 4 Gospels, according to the Bible Project. So if I get this wrong, they get this wrong. But I had a quick flick through. I'm like, yeah, it checks out. It's about 3 times. Jesus hears their question and answers directly. But Jesus asked a lot of questions. People would come and say, tell us the answer. Jesus would say, well, tell me your perspective. People would go, tell us what the answer is. Tell us the truth. What's the way to eternal life? And he would turn on them and say, well, what do you think the way to eternal life? He would constantly be asking questions and engaging with people. So when he said, love one another as I have loved you, he showed us what authority looks like. He showed us what it means to hang out with people. He said asking questions, if you look at his life, is a good thing. And then the ultimate thing that he showed us was that he said, I love you guys a lot. And he called it a day. No. He said, I love you guys a lot. So much, in fact, that I'm willing to lay down my life so that you can pick up life with God forever. And Jesus went to the cross and he died. And when he came back to life and he said to the church, all right, or to the people gathered who were the church, the gathering of people, and said, going forward, you're going to go and tell people about me. You're going to go and tell people about the fact that God is doing a new thing in this world. He handed over the mission of the church to the people gathered, and from there it just went on, and here we are today, 2,000 years later, because a group of people saw something that they couldn't unsee and chose to love in a way that wasn't because they were great people, but because it's exactly what Jesus had done for them. And the church stands out again and again and again when we show amazing sacrificial love. So, we give, we serve, we love. Because the standard got tied to Jesus, and the standard is, as I have loved you, you will go and you will love. So to finish off this teaching part of our series, I want to get really practical. And I want to ask each of you to consider engaging in one of these areas in either giving, serving, or loving. Now, some of you have already done that, and thank you so much for your generosity and for your serving and for your loving of your neighbours. But I want to push just a little bit more this morning and just explain where a couple of things are going. I'll put this slide up actually, because that's probably more helpful. So let's talk about giving for a second. Now, that QR code, if you want to follow it, goes to our website, which has Give, Serve, Love, and has the ways that you can engage. It doesn't go to like a banking app or anything like that, just to be clear. That goes to the website, which has all the different ways that you can do, that you can be engaged with Be Rich. So if you've been journeying with us for the past 3 weeks, hopefully it is abundantly clear that we have been very generously given a lot in our lives, and the expectation in following Jesus is that we get to give away our lives. In fact, Jesus says that the way that we find our lives is by the way we give it away. In fact, when we die, how do we celebrate people who are dead? By how much of their life they gave away, right? When they get to the end of their life, no one does the accumulation metric. No one says, here's Dave, he died, and look how much money he had. He got promoted. Dave was in the office 70 hours a week. No one plays the accumulation game. When someone dies, we measure in how much of our life has been given away. Dave was someone, sorry, there's no Daves in here, is there? I'm trying to scan the room. I know most people say nearly everyone's name. I don't think we have a Dave. Sorry if we do. The measure of a life well lived is how much of it was given away. Dave hung out with his family. Dave invested in his community. Dave was there when I needed him. Not Dave was at work. People remember people by the way they gave of their time. Dave was generous. Because of Dave's generosity, these community groups were able to do amazing things. Because of Dave's generosity of his time, people were able to be blessed by his presence and who he was. Our life isn't measured at the end of our life by how much we accumulated. Because what happens with everything that gets accumulated? It gets given away. So some of you guys are downsizing. Some of you guys are dealing with stuff, right? We accumulate, and we've got two options with our stuff. We either give it to someone and pray they do something with it, or it gets given to someone else and it just goes away and we don't know what happens with it. We build bigger sheds to fit more stuff to die, and then that stuff we hope will get used by the next generation, but maybe not. Our life is not measured by accumulation. It's measured by what we give away. So hopefully you hear that loud and clear. Jesus' command to his church is to love as he loved. Paul's command to Timothy was to tell the people in the church, be generous. It's part of our formation. You can't follow Jesus and not have generosity be a part of our formation. So, we're going to be rich. We're going to give. Now, the two places this year. So last year we had Woodlapine down the bottom of the hill there, and we had Darling Range Senior Hub that we supported, and we raised some funds and we gave those funds away. This year, the two places that we have is the Forestfield Primary P&C and Compassionate Communities, which is run through the city of Kalamunda. So just to tell you quickly about our two community champions. So Forestfield Primary School P&C, they get up to a few things. I asked the P&C, can one of them come and talk? And they said, can you talk for us? I said, no problem. I get it. Fear of public speaking, 100% understand that. I understand. A few things that they said to pass on to you guys that they get up to. Some of the things that they get up to down there at the school is that they do services. They run the canteen to make sure that there are affordable, nutritional meals there once a week. They have fundraisers for external causes. As most schools do, they put a lot of effort into making sure that things outside of the school and in the community, like telethon, speech apraxia, and Hero Hunter Day, they do that sort of awareness and fundraisers for external causes. They run events. They do Mother's Day, Father's Day, end of year fun, disco, just make sure the kids are motivated. They're also responsible for purchasing things within the school, which is pretty cool. They're getting a fan for their assembly area. They've got shelving for the library, new play equipment that they were in charge of getting, new seating in the library. And of course, they're also involved with support school events, just sort of making sure people feel welcome to the community. So down there at Forestfield Primary, there's a lot of great kids, and there's a wonderful P&C that makes sure that those kids are supported, loved, and looked after. So that's one of our community champions that we want to ensure that they keep doing what they do, so we're raising funds for them. And the other one is Compassionate Communities. Now, this is an initiative that's run by the city, and in fact, we've been involved with hosting some things here. Now, were any of you at the movie night? Yep, a couple of you, great. What they're looking at in Compassionate Communities is having a conversation around dying and death and making sure that people end their journey well, which I have to say, when they started doing this with the city, out of the work that John and Dawn did here around the conversations of end of life, it just sort of matched up perfectly. Like, it's something great that we get to be involved in as a church to help bring a conversation to our community that people don't just, get older and suddenly everything works out fine. We actually, as a community, need to support aging and be able to have conversations and make sure things are in order and all that sort of stuff. So Compassionate Communities is a great space that brings conversation and awareness into how we can, as a city of Kalamunda, have conversations in that space and be able to look after that. So those are our two community champions for this year. So if you give, those are the two things that they are going to be going to. Now, serve. Serving is all about how you guys serve and how we serve in the church in our community. So if you follow that link on there, the QR code, it will take you to the website, and one of the things you can do is fill out a form there. Now, this is another thing. Again, this is not salvation by works. This is just us as a church saying, where do we serve in the community? All right, so if you're able to online fill out that form and say, I actually volunteer at here or here for this many hours a week, that would be great. We don't know names, because that's not what's important. We just want to see, as a church community, Where is it that people are involved within the city of Kalamunda? And even if it's outside the city of Kalamunda, put it down anyway. That's absolutely fine. Now, if you can't do that on the technology front, out there through the doors next to the Lego bricks, remember the famous Lego bricks earlier? Is a form, a paper form that you can just chuck down there. Again, there's no names. We don't care who's doing what. We just want to go, as a community, are we actually involved in serving? Now, you can sit there and probably go, I'm not going to tell anyone, but I do serve. That's fine. I don't care. But it would be really helpful if you could say where you serve, because then we can get an idea as a church how it is that we are involved in helping the city of Kalamunda run. And then finally, Lego bricks, love. How can you show love to your neighbor? For some of you, I'll be dead honest, you have some issues with your neighbor, and maybe none of us in the room do. If that's good, that's great, but maybe you do, or maybe there's a bit of tension, or maybe something's happened before. This could be an opportunity to front foot this and work on reconciliation of the relationship. Maybe there's a neighbor who is a bit silly, in your opinion. You're probably a bit silly in their opinion. Maybe this is an opportunity to take around a treat or a gift, or just go around and say, hey, can I have a coffee with you? Wouldn't that be awesome if one of the outcomes of Be Rich was that we could see reconciliation between some neighbors in our community? Or perhaps you've got a neighbor who's actually not in a great place, but you don't know that. And they need someone to knock on the door and to ask them if they're okay. Maybe your role right now is to be encouraged, and maybe there's a little tap in your heart, a little bit of a nudge with the Spirit saying, you need to go next door and you need to take them some muffins. And you're not just going to go, here's some food because my church said I should go give food. You can do that if you want. It doesn't capture the heart of Be Rich, but maybe you just need to go across there, take some muffins and go, hey, I know we don't connect much, but I just want to know, how are you going? Like, really, how are you going? Because there's probably some people in our community, and they could be living next door to us who are doing it tough. Maybe not financially, maybe they're just isolated. Wouldn't it be great to be known as a church that goes to our neighbors, and because we live next to them, they are part of your community for as long as they're there. And I just want to say, if you live at the top of the hill, I'm down at Forestville, but if you live at the top of the hill, your neighbors are probably there for a long time, right? There's not a lot of movement up here in the hills. So what an opportunity to go to your neighbor, to reach out to them, and to show them some love, to reconnect, to reconcile, or perhaps to find out that they need some support. And then go get a brick and put it in. All right, let's land the plane. I would love for you to be generous in everything that you do. And I hope that my life is marked by generosity, because Jesus died for us. Jesus served the people around him. Jesus did so much while he was on earth, and then he went away and said, it's over to you. And the church has been in charge of this ever since. How do we love those around us? How do we be there for those around us? So would you consider following the command of Paul, for those of us who are rich in this world, to be generous, to be good, to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share?